Well, hello class, and welcome to the start of Unit 3. Believe it or not, we're already a quarter of the way through the term, the semester. We've just finished week 4, so our first 2 units, obviously at 2 weeks apiece, 4 weeks. We are flying by. So just a thank you, I guess I would say, for your contributions, for the thoughts that have been shared, the considerate responses, the timeliness of your posts and so forth. And, not everything's perfect. And so, but overall things have gone really well. So I'm grateful for what you've contributed in your commitment to the overall learning process. Just a couple of things I thought I would mention about this class. You probably noticed that the content is very different than the rest of your curriculum in the clinical psychology program. If you haven't, I'll just mention that this content is very different than the rest of the curriculum in your marriage and family therapy clinical psychology program. And that's by design, right? I was talking to somebody today and I was telling them that I taught a career class in an MFT program, and they're kind of like, you do what? It's very interesting. It's very different, and yet I think that there's some great connections. I'm going to talk about that here in a bit. But I hope that you will find this content, this class, just the overall experience, I would even say, to be a bit of a respite, a bit of a kind of a calm in the storm, if you will, as you, you just progress through the day. You just think about things a little bit differently, and you're maybe overwhelmed with some of your other coursework or assignments, and then you realize, oh yeah, I get to go into the online classroom in PPSY555 and think differently. Maybe even you feel like you exercise a different part of your brain, and you're answering different questions. You're thinking deeply about different things. I don't know what the case is, but I just hope that you will have found this to be a different and enjoyable, and I would even, again, offer up, maybe you could say, peaceful learning experience for you. I hope that's the case. So I thought about this idea, and this is kind of the example, and it's really just kind of a general example, but I want to kind of lay before you how I see this career class kind of fitting into the greater whole of your program. And then I want to talk about where we're headed in the upcoming couple of weeks in this next unit. I get I shouldn't say a lot, I get some referrals from former students that were in this class of mine that are practicing marriage and family therapists. I get referrals from faculty in the department who they know that their scope is outside the realm of career counseling, and so they'll say, oh, I don't do that, but you should contact a colleague of mine or a former professor of mine, Jeff Boyan, and he can do that. And so I've actually gotten a good number of clients from referrals from that. So there's some connections there, and oftentimes if someone has seen a therapist for whatever reason it may be, they perhaps have other career needs or some sort of professional executive needs that they have. In fact, there was an article, maybe you saw it today in the not the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, and it talked about how oftentimes those that operate in an executive coach role, they sometimes blend, maybe you could even say blur the lines between a therapist and a coach. And some individuals that are in more of a corporate setting that are meeting with a coach, they actually want their coach to be a therapist. And I think in a lot of ways it's because I think the best coaches are those that are trained in counseling in a lot of ways, because they're well-versed in listening, hopefully they're well-versed in asking questions and then giving suggestions. And so I think that what's interesting in the early part of this article is it talked about how I don't know if the coach is a trained counselor, but said that was basically in response to their client. That was a one-time only thing. We're not going to blur the lines between counseling and coaching. If we're going to meet, it's going to be for coaching purposes, not for counseling purposes. And I don't know if that was because of charges or different things, but it's just an interesting dilemma, if you will, to think about kind of the blurring of lines there. But I also mention that because it's not an interesting dilemma as much as it just makes sense, because so much of what is being brought into a counseling conversation, I think, has some roots that kind of draw back to a career component, right? Something that's happening in one's professional overall experience, their job, their career, even how they might define their vocational identity and calling. And so I think about this, if let's say there's a family of four, so a mom and a dad, and let's say they have a 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl. And again, these are just kind of general, and I'm just going to throw some examples out here, so don't read too much into it, but I hopefully you'll be able to make some connections and see where I'm coming from. The dad has found solace in the bottle and has really taken to drinking heavily over the past 6 months, and just sits at home, isn't working right now, playing video games, just kind of the front yard is going to pot, their lawn's not being mowed. The wife, the mother, is just at her wit's end. She's asked the husband to go to counseling over and over and over, to which he's responded, "We don't need that. We're fine. We're doing okay." And she was able to stay home because he had a really good job, but now she's back to work. Because he was laid off, and so she's only been able to find part-time work. She's been out of the workforce for so many years. As her kids were growing up, and her 14-year-old has just gone back to school after a year of being homeschooled for the first 12 years of, 8 years of his education. And the daughter, she's been in school, and everyone's having issues now. So mom's not happy because she's back to work, and she's fighting with her husband. And the daughter is she just engaged in some relationships that have not been healthy for her, and she's angry, and she comes home every day from school and she slams the door and she locks herself into her room and never comes out and talks to her parents, which is so abnormal because for so many years she was so close to her dad and had a really great relationship, and they could talk about all sorts of things. And the son has been in trouble with the principal, and he was having a hard time adjusting, and finally adjusted, and then he ended up making some really good friends in middle school. And over the past 3 to 4 months, he's been in the principal's office now on 6 separate occasions. And the friends that he was hanging out with, who his parents were really pleased with, are no longer coming around the house, not hanging around. And so finally the husband says, let's just go, right? And basically I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's just go to therapy. Maybe you'll stop bugging me if we just go and talk to somebody. So they go and they talk, and they take different turns. And well, the therapist asks the husband, first of all, what's wrong? He said, nothing's wrong. Well, your wife says this, and I'm seeing, there's some, noticeable anger in your face. And he says, it's no big deal. I just got laid off. I've had a hard time finding a job. Oh, that's interesting. And so they talk for a bit more, and then the wife comes in, and she explains that ever since he got laid off from his really well-paying job, he's just been depressed. He's just been down in the dumps. He's not been functioning well. He's not going out. He's not being as active. He's not exercising. He's gained weight. All these different things that come with this. And there's just anger issues. And there's she's afraid that he's become an alcoholic. And so there's alcohol abuse issues. And when he drinks, he gets angry. And when he gets angry, he's not abusive from a physical standpoint, but definitely from a verbal standpoint. And the kids no longer want to be around him. It's just an ugly situation at home. And so she's gone back to work, and she actually doesn't mind working, but she's not making enough because she's only working part-time, and there's some challenges that exist with that. And she doesn't mind going to work, like I said. She just wishes that her husband would be able to find a job and they could make ends meet. And she's disclosed that perhaps they might even lose their house because they're having some hard times making ends meet, so much so that they might only have enough money to pay their mortgage for the next 2 months, and they're quite concerned. The son comes in, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Why are you so angry? I heard you've been in the principal's office. And, no, nothing's wrong. Turns out that the friends that he had befriended since coming to school only liked him because he dressed well and had the coolest things, and he was always able to help pay for these friends to go to the arcade and do different things that junior high students do. And when his dad got laid off, the money ran out, and he was no longer able to provide for his friends, and so his friends ditched him. And so the person that he one time considered to be his best friend said, I no longer want to hang out with you, in so many words. And the son ended up punching him again, sent to the principal's office, and was suspended for 2 days, and was home just sulking around the house. And it turns out that because dad has lost his job and the money that came with that, he now is no longer accepted and has in fact been bullied because he doesn't have the cool things that he one time did. And then the daughter comes in and she discloses that she's been engaged in some promiscuous relationships, and has been hanging out with folks that are, she knows are not good for her, but that's all she can find because what were her, quote, good friends, they've ditched her ever since the other friend in her group got the first driver's license and first car. And she had been promised, because she was the oldest in the group, that she was going to be the first person to get her license and her car. But when her dad lost his job, the money ran out, and he was no longer able to pay for her to get the car. And so you can see that a lot of these challenges, while they're manifesting themselves, and of course this is just general stereotypical, but as they've manifested themselves, they've all stemmed back to this reality of the career and the work, and the fact that he was working and she wasn't working, and she is working, he's not working. But the kind of the waterfall effect, if you will, the ripple effect of everything that took place because of the job loss. In fact, you'll remember from the book Well-Being that Rath and Harder talk about how some of the research indicates that it's easier to overcome the death of a loved one than it is the loss of a job. Because as I was talking to my boss even today, so often our identity is found in not who we are, or I should say we find who we are by looking at what it is that we do. And so when the thing that we do goes away, who we are, we feel slips through our fingers as well, and it's gone, and we no longer know who we are because the thing that we once did is no longer there. Especially when so much stock is placed in it, as this individual's life was, his livelihood was. In fact, he was up for promotion, and then with a merger that took place, he no longer was up for promotion. Not just that, but he was actually laid off from the position, given a severance package that expired only after 3 months, and then they were left with very little. So the challenges that come with career, obviously this is just one example. There's so many that take place, but they really do spill out into so many aspects of our life. And so I can't guarantee things, right? I'm not a betting person, but I would be willing to put, a couple bucks, or even more than that. I'd be willing to bet down to dollars that quite often, not all the time, but quite often, the thing that the individual is coming to see you or another therapist about has some stemming issue from career. I just think of even the last couple of clients that I've worked with, and I have to be careful, as I don't want to cross a line, as I mentioned, blurring between therapist and career coach, career counselor, but they're bringing a lot of that into the conversation because we're all dealing with things. And so, what's the question? Is it the chicken or the egg? Which one took place first? Is it the marital issues that occurred before the job loss, or did the job loss cause the marital issues? And I would say they probably, they careened into each other, then they've caused additional issues along the way. So I hope that you'll be able to see, that's just one simple example, but I hope that you'll be able to start seeing more and more how career really does intersect with the overall work that we are doing in the counseling relationship. So as we jump into week 5 and 6 in Unit 3, we're going to get into a couple of new things. We're going to look at the Liptak text, and I really like this book. It's very practical. It's very much what do you do when you're meeting with a client, and there's some very practical application that's in that. And you're going to, at the end of your time reading that text, at the end of the first week, I believe it is, you're going to write 3 takeaways. And write that, not just I liked it, it was fun, thanks for writing, but like actual takeaways, like give me thorough and thoughtful responses. What are 3 takeaways from the reading? What are 2 questions you still have? And the questions, I want them to deal specifically with the Liptak text. And think about how, not just what the Liptak text says, but think about what it says in relationship and the intersection, the context, if you will, of the greater whole of the unit that we're looking at this week. And then the third thing you'll look at, so that's the 3 takeaways, the 2 questions, and the 1 actionable item. What is something that you have learned from the reading today as you read it that you could literally put into practice tomorrow? Okay, and I will take those responses, and in 15 minutes I will then, in the first week of the second week of the current unit, I will respond to a number of those questions and give you some response and thoughts on that. Okay, so that's where we're headed with that. Then there's an exercise. So that's an additional content piece that we didn't have in the last 2 units, and this is something for you to work through. I really enjoy and appreciate this exercise. I like all of them. This is a great one to start with because I think perhaps some of you are asking the question, what am I going to do when I'm done with this degree? And this may be something that's very helpful for you. Okay, so like I said before, I'll make sure to get all of your assignments returned by the end of this week. So it's 1 week from when the previous unit ended. If you have any questions or any discrepancies you see in the grades, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope that's helpful as I kind of make some connections between career counseling and marriage and family therapy. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Have a great unit. I'm looking forward to engaging with you, and I look forward to, again, seeing you online this unit.